It wasn't recording. Sorry for that.
Okay.
No.
All right, so visual hierarchy is a design principle that involves arranging the content on the screen so people can, at a glance, understand where they are, what they're supposed to do, and also what action to take. That's also really important, without really having to think, or something like this where you basically have to read the entire thing in order to understand what to do or how it's supposed to go together. And you can even tell that even though I blurred out the content, you can just sort of tell that intuitively just by looking at it, right? So when you have visual hierarchy, it reduces confusion, it speeds up interaction, and overall it creates a smoother, more intuitive user experience. Now, you might think that you might need to be naturally creative to be good at design. That's something I hear a lot from developers. I don't have a designer's eye, I'm not creative. But that's not really the case. You don't really need that. You don't need to be born with talent. I actually believe people are not born with talent. They acquire skills as they go, and they learn the principles. And you can learn these principles as well, and this is what I'm going to talk about today. It's very mechanical in the beginning. Over time, you develop a little more fluency, you practice it, and it gets to be a little bit like second nature, but they really are rules. They're not necessarily as hard and fast as some of the mathematical rules that we do, because there's a lot of flexibility within those rules. But hopefully at the end of the session today, you'll have some practical ways to take away with you that you can use to improve the visual hierarchy of your apps in the future. So it's really not a matter of taste or trends or fashion or anything like that. That's the other thing. It's kind of timeless. So these are things that you will always use. They'll be relevant 20 years from now, I guarantee it, because humans themselves have not changed. Like, our technology changes, but as humans, we evolve very, very slowly. So how we perceive today is how we perceived 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years from now. Maybe with small changes, but overall, that's how we are. For better and for worse sometimes. All right, how about this? Look better? Okay, so actually one thing I forgot to ask you was, how did that first one make you feel? Did you have a feeling? Did everybody sort of have a feeling when they looked at that? Did anybody want to guess what, or suggest what they thought they felt, or say what? Disoriented? Anxious?
Like it was 2003.
Two?
Like it was 2003.
2003, so taking back to the past, time capsule. Okay, good. Those are all good suggestions. And what about this? From a feeling perspective.
Confused.
You still confused? Okay, all right, that's fair. It's dense, right? And this actually, one of the reasons why I chose this was because the other one had a lot of information, and that's also something that we struggle with a lot with design and FileMaker, is like, how do we organize all this information? Where do we put it, right? But I still try to follow visual hierarchy here. This is a travel company. They take a lot of information. They need to know a lot of pieces of information about their travelers, like medical things, as well as itinerary and all sorts of things. So, but I hope this looks better than the other one. Okay, good. For okay, all right, we have some dissenters. Maybe we'll be able to win you over. Okay, so a lot of times we're sort of focused on the data and the functionality, but I do think that great apps also focus on how people feel. And actually, in a way, it doesn't matter how we feel about it. It really is how do your users feel. So we have our own feelings and suggestions, and we start off with our educated guesses, but we actually don't know until we actually put it in front of the people who are going to use it, and then ultimately they are going to be the ones who give us the feedback and tell us, is it working for them or not? And when they feel that an app helps them accomplish their goals easily without friction, that creates a positive emotional feedback. And what that happens is they feel supported, right? They feel understood, they feel in control. And that reduces their frustration. And ultimately, it leads to them to have more trust in you as a developer, right? So that means fewer support issues, fewer rework requests, fewer requests for training, fewer requests for help, all that kind of stuff. So when your app feels modern and easy to use, that helps them feel confident, and that's essentially a strategic advantage for you as a developer. All right, so let's talk about how to create a strong visual hierarchy on your UI. So I'm going to give you all 7 points right away. We're just going to briefly go through the 7, and then I'm going to break it down. I had a lot of fun doing this presentation, and we're going to just look at it through a very relatable lens. And then after I go through those, then we'll do some UI evaluation at the end of some actual screens. So the first key way is to just the idea of having a visual hierarchy. So the idea that when you start, you need to define a visual hierarchy in the first place. You're going to have something that's the most important thing. What's going to stand out, right? That's basically the basic idea. Then you need to plan your information architecture. So what is going to go into the actual hierarchy that you've set up? So any given set of data can be organized in different ways. So we'll talk all about these in detail more, so don't worry if you're just catching them. We're just going to go through as an introduction, and then we'll go into deeper into each one. The third is contrast. So using contrast to make certain things stand out, usually the more important things, and then make the less important things fade into the background. Grouping, so visually connecting things that are related and disconnecting things that are not related. Size, so different weight and size. So this is something I see quite a lot, where everything is basically the same exact size. There's no clues that tell us what's more important, what's less important. Alignment, so making sure that you have appropriate alignment within groups, between groups, text baselines, margins, and so on. That helps create a sense of order and clarity. And then applying patterns consistently. So once you have set up all this hierarchy, you don't need to reinvent it every new screen that you get, right? You can reuse it again and again, and that also helps the users because once they learn it once, then they're able to apply this knowledge by extension to other areas of your system. So it makes it more efficient. It also ties into something like theme and styles, right? So once you set up your styles, you're not having to reinvent them every time. You can set them up and then reuse them over and over again. So the whole point of this is really to reduce the cognitive load for people when they're coming to your layout, especially for the first time, but not only for the first time, and make the experience feel a little bit easier. Okay, so I did actually create a PDF that you can download for this if you're interested. I have a reference at the end of the PDF, so there's more detail in it. You can read that later. But the last page, page 9, has a little cheat sheet with all of these 7 points on it, so that at the end, when we're evaluating them, you have a reference in front of you of what we're looking at and what we're looking for. Okay, so this was super fun for me. When I started this presentation, I knew I wanted to talk about visual hierarchy, and I love to have a metaphor because I feel like it's easier for people to relate. A lot of times, design feels very abstract, and it makes it easier when you can relate it to something that's very familiar to you. So what I did was I was looking for stock photography, which is what I usually use, and I really couldn't find anything. So I was like, you know what, I can take my own photos. And I decided that going to the store is actually the perfect metaphor to show you how visual hierarchy works. So I went, you're going to get a tour of Canadian retail stores around my house today for the next hour or so. So I went to, this is unfortunately Canadian Tire. It's a very interesting type of place. You can buy all sorts of different things there. It's sort of like a bit of a catch-all. But let's say you've never been here before, which probably most of you haven't. By the way, do you have this type of store here in Europe? Is this something that's familiar? Sort of? Okay, maybe. All right. So how quickly do you think, let's say you're going to the store for something in particular, it doesn't matter what it is, how confident are you, or how quickly do you think you could find it without asking somebody? Right. You don't, right? You kind of go in and it's somewhat organized, but it's very loosely organized. There's not a lot of clues that tell you where to go. You'd have to either wander around looking through everything and trying to figure out how it's organized and how things are, or you just ask somebody, where can I find X, right? So, yes?
In this case, it could be a strategy of the shop.
It could be a strategy of the shop. That's true, but how do you feel being manipulated into this? Like, you've come here not for this. You've come here for something specific, right? Do you feel good about being kind of forced into looking through a whole bunch of other things you didn't intend to buy? So you could be correct. Maybe some marketers there said, oh, we're going to increase our sales by simply putting more things in front of the consumer. And yes, these are sort of sale areas. But in terms of buying something specific, finding something specific, it's not a very good way. And so that's sort of where it relates to FileMaker development, where your really users are not just coming there. They're not anonymous, generally speaking, right? They're usually business users who are familiar with the system. They're there for a particular task. You want them to be able to find and go to that task right away rather than having to look all the way around. Okay, so let's compare that with this. I was really pleasantly surprised. This is Home Depot, and they went to a lot of trouble to set up this signage system. So how confident are you finding something here? A lot better, right? So the same business as Canadian Tire, but they've chosen a different strategy, right, of really making it easy for you to find what you want. And what it does is that when I leave, I feel good because I came in, I had a good experience, I was able to find what I needed. What does that mean? I'm going to come back again later, right? I'm more inclined to return because I was able to easily find what I needed and go back to the store. So this is really kind of the power of visual hierarchy, essentially. So the other thing to note about this is that even though you might not know the principles of design, you're surrounded by design all the time. It's there. You may not be consciously aware of it, but everything your eye touches that isn't something from the natural world has been designed for you, right? So it is all around you. You just have to kind of know where to look and how to look at it. And so you do kind of know these already intuitively. So it's really more about kind of understanding what to look for and just being more conscious with it. Okay, so let's get into the actual points, each one of the points. So we talked about defining a clear visual hierarchy. So the whole purpose is to make it clearer and easier for people to understand your UI. And the first step is to just simply plan that you are going to have a visual hierarchy. Something is going to be most important. You want to have some sort of entry point for users when they come to that screen, so it has to have some sort of purpose. The first thing, and that's going to be the thing that you want them to focus on the most. And then what's second, what's third, and so on. So you're going to have to decide, all right, how am I going to actually show this? And the rest of the presentation will kind of show you how to do that, but just started by the idea of you need a hierarchy. So we saw this. This is pretty clear, right? So you have different levels here. So there's a clear entry point. So first thing, they made the largest thing, the most important thing, they made the most important thing the largest. So if I'm standing at the one end of the store, I can pretty much read, I mean, the photo doesn't always translate, but I can read quite far down the aisles, and of course I can keep walking and then read more signs, but I can see them from very far away. And then as I get closer, I start to see more detail about what is in those aisles. So I can say, all right, I'm going to go to electrical or appliances or plumbing first. I'm going to go towards that area, and then I'm going to get more information about what's in the actual aisle. So there might be 3 or 4 aisles devoted to each category, and then I might look through those aisle signs to determine more specifically where I want to go from there. So you have these distinct levels, right? So that's an important part of visual hierarchy. I also went to Best Buy, and to be fair, they were renovating the store, so it was in a bit of disarray, but I had a similar experience as at Canadian Tire, right? You kind of go there, and you can't really tell. There's just sort of like a sign, okay, I'll go over to that area. And when I went over to Smart Home, it wasn't Smart Home. It was, it was like keyboards and Xboxes and things like that, right? By the way, almost nobody stopped me when I was taking these photos. I was worried. I was like, oh, someone's going to wonder what I was doing. I only had it one place, and I'll tell you where when I get to it. So I had to come back to some of these places more than once. This is my local grocery store. So you can see, again, aisles in the center, signs in the center of the aisle. Really large number. In almost all of these cases, the number is the largest thing because the fallback is I ask somebody, where do I find it? X, and they're going to say aisle number N, right? And they're going to direct you, so you're going to look for the number of the aisle. But again, they have a very clear visual hierarchy here, large number, and then more smaller data kind of telling you what's inside. Here's a different grocery store. So same concept, but slightly different application, different color scheme, and so on. And then it's also a bit more granular because they decided at one end of the aisle is one set of content. If you walk to the other end, they show you what's at that end. So the first store just had one sign in the middle. This store has one on either end with different information to kind of help you orient yourself. And then I went to the dollar store, and they're just like, we're just going to give you numbers. We're not even going to try to tell you what's in these aisles. It's a much smaller store, first of all, and second of all, they have just a lot of very small items, and they change seasonally. So it would be, I think, impractical for them to try and tell you what's in each of these aisles, so I don't think they even try to. But what that means is they're relying on you to ask somebody, all right, where do I find this? And then you have to go to that place. Okay, so here is a demonstration of visual hierarchy at work. You're going to look at top-level information first, then you're going to read second-level information, then you're going to go to third level, and then you might go back up to the top through less important information afterwards. That's how most people read it, because the thing that's larger attracts your attention just sort of naturally. Is that track with how people read it, mostly? Okay. So really, this is what you're trying to do, is you're going to help them understand where to look, where to go first, and then lead them to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. That make sense so far? Okay, great. So now that you have your hierarchy, you have the idea, okay, I'm going to have these levels. What do I put in the levels? What do I fill them with? How do I organize this information? And so we call that planning your information architecture. Can I see a show of hands of who's heard the term information architecture before? Oh, so quite a lot of you. That's great. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and just a refresher for everybody else, information architecture is really the organizing, labeling, presenting of information on the screen. And the important thing to know about this is it can be different from the data architecture in the back, right? I see this a lot where people just take their database structure. So I have contacts, I have invoices, I have whatever. Let's just say contacts and invoices for simplicity. And I'm going to just show that on the front. That might work, but sometimes we have more complex information that doesn't fit as neatly into these categories, right? A lot of our clients are in extremely specific industries that are hard to organize. There's not necessarily something so literal to do it. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that your table structure is exactly the same as what your information architecture will be. And here's why. This is an example of it. So I have organic, lettuce, and herbs. Are these three things all equivalent? No. So organic could be either a category above lettuce and herbs go into organic, or organic could be an attribute of lettuce and herbs. So why did they put it separately? Well, because it would be inconvenient to put it inside of each section, right? They're like, well, each one is a small section, so we're just going to put all the organic together, right? So for the convenience of the consumer coming into the store. So that's what I mean when I say the information architecture may not follow what your data. I bet you that's not how the data, when they're warehousing these items, that's probably not how it's connected in the background. But for example, you wouldn't go to the store and expect it all to be alphabetical, right? That would be just nonsensical, right? So there's some sort of organization that's happening here, and we're just so used to it we don't even notice it anymore, but this is a real thing. And so this idea we can bring with us to our FileMaker development. Here's another interesting case, apparel crafts. So let's say I wanted to, decorate T-shirts for my son's birthday party. Do I say to myself, oh, I'm going to go to the craft store and I'm going to go to the apparel crafts aisle? No. But when we see apparel crafts, we know, oh, I'm looking for a T-shirt. I see apparel crafts is probably there, right? So somebody has created this category of apparel crafts, which is somewhat abstract, in order to make sense of a bunch of different things that are connected together in order to make a category out of it. So this is the act of creating information architecture. So this is why we don't necessarily just blindly go with the background. With the database architecture. Here they decided to have separate sections for specialty imported items. Again, we see these things are not all equivalent, right? British, Caribbean, East Asian, European, and rice. And actually, I chuckled. I was like, European? That's awfully generic. What's in that section? And it was like pickled beets, and it was mostly Polish stuff. And I was like, why wouldn't they just say Polish? But anyway, I guess they were like, maybe they pull things in and out of that section. I don't know. But anyway, from a visual hierarchy perspective, you have the big aisle sign, and then you notice you have also signs on the aisle itself, right? So once they orient themselves, this is kind of like progressive disclosure, then you have another sign directing you to something more specific, right? So they don't just let you, I mean, they could just let you sort of scan the aisles, but they're like, okay, let's make it easier for them to go right to the thing that they want. So this was the place where they asked me, what are you doing? Who do you work for? This is the LCBO, which is the government-owned retail and distributor of alcoholic beverages in Ontario. So my husband was like, why were you just going there taking pictures? They thought you were casing the joint. I wasn't. And I was explaining to him what my presentation was on, and his eyes started to glaze over, and he was like, you're fine. It's fine. So anyway, they could have done this beer section by type, right? Belgians are well known for their beer. You could have IPA, lager, pilsner, whatever else. But they didn't. They had by region, so domestic, international, Canadian craft. So there's multiple ways that you can organize your information. One more thing. Well, how do you feel when this happens? You're looking for cooking wine, and instead you get minced ginger and M&Ms. Do people know what M&Ms are? I think they're a Canadian thing. They're like chocolate, kind of like Smarties, but way better. Okay, all right, good. So you feel disappointed, right, when you're expecting something and you don't get it, right? That's my point of the design. You have a feeling inside. Okay, so the bottom line is it's important for the usability of your app to decide how exactly you're going to organize all this information. And I actually do have a whole module about this in my UX design workshop about organizing your information architecture. And so you can choose different ways. So it could be broad and shallow, so a lot of sort of top level, or not a lot, but numerous top level categories, depending on what the data is. Or you might have like a narrow and deep, so relatively fewer choices at the beginning, and then they go and branch out off into deeper choices as you go. And they might not all be the same depth, right? So the structure really isn't about the data itself. It's really about the meaning that you were ascribing to it and helping users with. And when you organize the screens around their goals and around the meaning and not the tables, they understand what it is. They can instantly find what matters to them, and they can feel confident and not disappointed. Finally, contrast. So this is so easy and impactful. I really like contrast. It's just something you can just use really easily. The idea is your stuff that you want to stand out, you want to make it contrast from the rest of the data, which means giving it more space, maybe giving it more color, giving it a larger size. We'll talk about size more specifically in another point, but this is just really, when there are visual differences, those communicate logical differences behind the data as well. So if every element looks the same, if you think back to that first example I showed you, with everything is pretty much the same, it's hard to tell what's what. You can't perceive the hierarchy, even if there is one, because everything is basically identical. So that contrast is really meaningful. So it's not decorative. We're not adding color for the sake of decoration or interest, or just like we thought it looked nice. We're adding it because we want to attract people's attention, right? We're not trying to style the objects, we're communicating. So if we look back at this one, so yellow and black are two of the most high contrast colors you can put together, right? It's very, we have animals in the insect world that are, can sting you. They're yellow and black. It's kind of a very eye-catching color. It's used often for emergency, like what's that? Poisons, yes. So things that like really attract your attention. They also use red and yellow and red to avoid it all just being yellow and black everywhere, but they also are doing the color combination, they're also reversing it, right? And they're doing that on the sign as well. So sometimes they have yellow on black, sometimes they have black on yellow, just to make it a little bit more interesting. And I'm not saying you have to have this amount of contrast. It'd probably be hard on the eyes if you had to look at a UI that was yellow and black constantly, but it's just a demonstration to show you how powerful it can be. This is white letters on a red background. So this is very popular. White lettering on a darker colored background, really any color that is sufficiently dark to contrast with the white, so that you kind of know. This is the thrift store, and they were actually extremely well organized. I was surprised, and it was well stocked, well organized, and it's not fancy, but it's very easy to tell where the sections are, even if you're all the way across the store, right? And then you can just even go a little bit closer. Like even here, the camera was able to pick up pretty easily furniture, bed and bath in the background. So making it sufficiently large that it can be seen. Again, here a little more, 2 shades of blue, just white letters, white icon on 2 different shades of blue. So it's very simple, but it's very effective. This was my grocery store, and then the hardware store, which actually had fairly good signage. On the left is the checkout at the grocery store. Very easy to see it. It's yellow and black. You know, there's no question where you're supposed to go. On the right, I actually had to ask somebody, how do I get out of the store? I could not find the checkout. It turns out it's way in the back. There's like that photo of that woman, and if you go in there, you'll get stuck in a little boutique. So again, somebody had said earlier maybe they want you to buy more stuff, but I don't feel good about intending to leave the store and then getting diverted sort of by sleight of hand into some other place, right? So I was like, I don't really feel nice about that. So I'm more likely to go back to the Home Depot, even though this is a Canadian chain and Home Depot is an American chain. I feel like I can find things more easily at the other one. So here, what do you see first? Pharmacy, right? The aisle signs are actually closer to you physically, but you don't see them as much because they're fading out into the background. They fade away. You really focus on that large thing in the back, even though it's a bit further away. It's larger and darker than the other signage. I went to the bulk store. This was before Halloween. And I was like, oh, look, this is such a great example of why contrast is so important. Can anybody read what it says? Terrorific. And then boo. I keep thinking it says bop, but it says boo. Jackalicious and something pumpkins. I don't know. And then what was funny was I walked to the other end of the aisle, literally just walked a few feet over. This was the other side of those same signs. Right? Big difference. Okay, so contrast. This is a simple example of using contrast to create emphasis. So strong contrast like this just turns that hierarchy into the clarity, and it guides your eye towards the important information instead of forcing all that effort to figure it out. So when you guide people by helping them understand the priority of the screen, then they feel well supported. They trust you more. Okay, the fourth point, grouping related items together. So the idea is to place related items together, close together. And this is something we call proximity. It's one of the Gestalt design principles. I also have a downloadable about the Gestalt design principles on my website if you're interested in looking at those. There's quite a few principles that go into grouping, but proximity is one of the major ones. So just things being close together, we just automatically interpret them as a group, right? Because there's an aisle here, I see a group over here and a group over there, right? It's just the aisle dividing it just splits it into 2 groups. If there was no aisle, you'd just be one larger group. That's just sort of how humans interpret groups. So what that means is when we just sort of put a bunch of random information together, right, that isn't logically related, before we even have read anything, our eyes have said, okay, these things are a group. And then we start to read and we're like, oh, they're actually not a group. Or right, what we start to be like, remember that when we went to Canadian Tire, we're like, well, what are these things? What is the organization on here? So now you're expending extra effort to understand. So that also means we want to separate things that are not part of the same group. And also it ties into information hierarchy. What is the meaning of the group? What's the idea holding these things together? So in the grocery store, they group the vegetables together, but they don't just group all vegetables in one area, right? All of the peppers are with other kinds of peppers. And then they go to root vegetables. Like there's no reason why they couldn't, from a practical perspective, put the beets on the other side of the peppers and the parsnips or whatever. They could have mixed them together, but they didn't. There's some sort of logical progression to this that more or less reflects how we think about the information about vegetables in general. And again, these are not hard-cut categories in everybody's mind. It's not like we think, well, I really have like a very specific index in my mind of how vegetables are organized, but you do have a general sense, right? So you don't want to contradict people's sort of innate understanding of the information when you're grouping it visually. So if I go to the bakery, I'm not expecting fish, right? If I go to the fish market, I'm not expecting meat. So we want the grouping to reflect the expectations that people have when they're going to that area, and that helps them to navigate confidently because it makes sense with the way that they already think. And if content doesn't match, then that creates confusion. So back to Canadian Tire. It was actually hard to find bad examples of this because stores have really figured this out. But Canadian Tire, they had like filters, air filters, waterproof patch and seal tape. They had kindling, and I'm like, so you burn the fire and it makes smoke, and the air filters filter. I don't know. It's just, it doesn't really seem to have a strong idea behind why these things were chosen to be here in this particular place, other than to try and make me buy them, which makes me feel manipulated, which makes me not like it. And I just had to show you, this has nothing to do with the presentation, but I found that they sell jeans and belts next to the ladders at Canadian Tire for some reason. The bulk store, they did a really good job, other than the signage, they did a really good job of grouping things, right, very clearly. So it's logical soups, and then beans and soups, and then beans, and then rice, and then pastas and rice. I mean, this isn't an accidental. They had to plan these signs, print them up, install them, right? This isn't just somebody in the store thinking this up. This was really thought through. And it's that logical progression to the order, which is similar to how we think about these foods. Like, they didn't put candy where the rice is, right? They could have, but they didn't. Why? Because it would feel out of place. So when grouping is done well, you can rely less on labeling every single piece of information, right? So that good grouping lets users understand the information at a glance, reinforces to them that they're in the right place. So you don't need necessarily, you can save space by maybe removing some of these labels and providing more context. All right, visual weight and size. So these are another way of creating emphasis without color necessarily. So when it's bigger and bolder, that means pay attention to this. And something that's smaller and lighter is going to be less important, and it's going to fade into the background. It might be noticed later or down the line. When everything looks the same, looks equally important, same color, same weight, same size, I'm thinking back to that first one example again, then the users kind of hesitate, they start to read, and they start to think about, well, how does this all go together? And then they have to do a lot more work. So a clear hierarchy just lets them move through the screen much more easily. So visual size and weight this is a good example of that. Food and beverages is the big section above, and then they have cheese, but then actually you didn't see this, the other section has water, juice, and pop, and then cheese. So not all those things at the same time, presumably, but if you're looking for those things, those are the subsections, the second level of the hierarchy, but they're communicating it with this large type at the general level first. And then I think I mentioned the thrift store before. They actually have 4 levels of of organizational hierarchy, is also visual hierarchy, right? So they have kids at the top, then they have girls, so presumably they have girls and boys, then they have long sleeve tops, and activewear are at the same level, and then in activewear they have short sleeve tops. Now I'm not sure why short sleeve tops is in activewear. Yeah, you'd think it would be long sleeve and short sleeve, but they didn't. They have activewear and then short sleeve, and then presumably somewhere else a long sleeve. So it's a little bit confusing, which is why information architecture is important. Anyway, you can see that though they've used the size of the type to communicate these levels. Here again, they have banners with the general category, and then they have some of the largest numbers I think I saw in any of the stores, but very large numbers again to help you orient yourself. Where are we at the? That's sort of the fallback. Like if I can't find what I'm looking for, I'm going to ask somebody. They're going to direct me to this aisle. I'm going to easily see the aisle number and go there.
Question?
Yes. This one. Russell, can you wait for the mic?
I find it quite interesting that the maps and brooms stands out. Literally, it's longer. What do you think of that?
No,
design?
what happened? Well, it's either longer or they just pulled it out and didn't push it in. Yeah, okay. So that's another point, which is alignment. Yeah. So when you don't align, it sticks out and it breaks the pattern, and then you're like, well, why? And then you start to think about, well, who did this, and what were they thinking, and what's happening with the store. So anyway, yes. I'm going to pause. Do you feel this? You feel like it's kind of like cringy, right? A little bit? It's a physical feeling. It's physical. It's what I want to get to people about design. It's not just about up here looking at something, understanding it. Do you have another question? Okay. Okay, so look how much bigger the number is. This number is probably 50 points larger than the text. I'm guessing. Has anybody ever used this big of a discrepancy difference in text size in their layouts? Try it. Oh, okay, John has in the back. Okay, so try it. Just see what happens. You know, what does that do? How does that change how you feel about this information? Again, I'm going to bring, honestly, I could have just shown this one photo for every point, but they're doing this really well, visual size and weight, right? They're also playing with the color combinations. So they've got white text on black for the main one, and then they have white text on orange, repeating it's the same category, but they're just sort of changing it up so you can tell the difference. There's like one more way of telling these are two different levels visually of the hierarchy. And actually, they go even further. I was quite impressed with this. Like, this is somebody's job to draw these icons for every single one of these categories and make signs for each one of these, right? And so that another thing, if you don't speak English, you can still understand what's inside of that category. So just all about helping you find what you need. So using different sizes of type really tells users what level of information are they viewing, and it can help you get the user to focus on important information that they need, basically to make a decision usually, and those are important. So you want to save their energy for when it's critical. So when they're doing non-critical stuff, you don't want them wasting their energy trying to understand. When you present them, like, do you want to delete this record? You want them to clearly know what it is that they're doing. Or do you want to charge this client $1 million, right? It's an important decision. You want them to be fresh for that. So you don't want to waste their energy with a bunch of busy work that they didn't need to think about. All right, so we talked a little bit about alignment and spacing, but alignment and consistent spacing are what make the hierarchy feel really deliberate. So without it, it sort of feels improvised, or like we were pointing out before, somebody made a mistake, they didn't pay attention, they didn't think about it, and it kind of undermines the experience. It's a bit like, you read a book and it's like full of spelling errors. Like, well, why didn't they fix these before it went to print, So it has that feeling. It just creates messiness, and then that feeling that we had, that cringy feeling inside, like you don't want people to have that when you look at your UI, right? You want them to feel like, oh, look, it's nice. So you don't want them to question the app's reliability, because a lot of times our FileMaker solutions are highly functional. They work really well, but they may not give that nice calm feeling to people. We want them to feel like they can trust you. So here are a few examples of this. So the image on the left, everything inside, like on the shelves, is actually all the different size, but they've all pointed all the nozzles the same way, right? And there's strong alignment from the shelving itself. You have these sort of strong horizontal lines just from the shelves, which is kind of a bit like white space, on your page. And then the contents can be different. Like what's inside can all be different. That's very common in FileMaker. Sometimes the data is short, sometimes the data is long, but you have this structure, this internal structure that is imposing some order onto that kind of chaos. On the other side, on the right side, all of these products are actually the same size, but because they don't hang quite aligned, it looks messy. And also, I didn't take the photo right on. I was going to retake it, but I was like, no, but that just proves the point that when it's not aligned, it kind of disturbs us a little bit, right? We want things. So your design is going to benefit from strong lines.
Well, I find in that also the lack of contrast.
So lack of contrast, yes, that's another thing. But we were just trying to just do alignment here just to kind of isolate it. And this was one of the things where I felt funny. I noticed that they had this display of I think these are Xbox games. Actually, I didn't even know what they were. And so I'm like, oh, this is great. This demonstrates. So actually, it was only one or two were messed up, but I went and messed up a bunch of them. And I'm like, what is my life? What am I doing here? Yeah. And then, okay, so I'll tell you afterwards what happened. But I want you to just look at the screen for a second so you can experience this for yourselves. Are you ready? Just take a look at the screen. Ah, right? It's physical. It's physical. You could feel like the stress relieving. And then somebody came up to me, he's like, ma'am, can I help you? Like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Okay, so the other thing about alignment, there's lots of flexibility, lots of different ways that you can do alignment. You're not, stuck in one, you don't like center everything all the time. That's going to be the way. There's a lot of flexibility within the category of alignment, but just pick an alignment and try playing with it as well. Like, I really encourage experimentation. See if you can find something that seems to fit. And you all had that physical experience, so you all have the ability to understand whether it's working or not if you just kind of take a step back and think about it visually. So here they centered everything. Here they have two columns, left aligned, and again, some of these are sticking out, which feels like, yeah, and they're not quite all the same size because one of them was a bit longer. They couldn't fit everything, so they had to reduce the size. So you know what I mean? Like, you don't necessarily consciously notice it when you're at the store, but you do feel it anyway. Like, your brain still sees it. It still kind of feels disturbing a little bit, like an eye twitch. Here they did everything left aligned. So this was Staples. And I don't know why, but they chose quite a small type for their signs, so it's a little bit hard to see. So they are doing a bit of contrast, but not much in the way of leveraging different sizes. Like, to me, the category, the office essentials, could have been much larger. They have the space, but they kind of went a little bit subtle. Maybe that's really looking more sophisticated, but as a result, it's a little bit less usable. They also do have like black like walls that they're kind of using this black and white around the store. Sometimes it's hard to see the signs against the walls because they kind of blend in. But anyway, they decided practically to just, all right, we're just left line everything, have a fairly wide sign, then we won't run out of space for longer text. And of course, this is the most complex alignment that we saw. So I don't know if you noticed this before, but depending on which side of the aisle it's on, everything is aligned towards the center. This means that the signs are not interchangeable between the aisles unless they made them double-sided, which they might have. It was a bit too high up for me to check. I thought that was a bridge too far. If I started messing with their signage, I would get into trouble. I'm probably already on their surveillance, coming into the store. I actually did buy things because I just felt bad. When I went to the liquor store, I actually bought a bottle of wine, even though I didn't need one, because I thought I better, otherwise the police are going to come.
I thought you changed number 46, because that is off, right? Yeah.
46? No, 44, 45, 46, 47.
No, I mean the image, the icon is...
Oh, yes.
So somebody changed...
Somebody might have put it, yeah, there was a couple which were installed. The thing is, though, what's interesting about it is you can still see it at least. Like, it's nice if it's perfect, but it's still understandable. So even if they do it a little bit incorrectly, at least it still works. At least you're not completely lost, right?
Yeah. And you could also discuss whether in the middle section you would have to align it to the left if you have the arrow to the left, and align
Yes,
it to the right.
you do.
If the arrow is to the right.
You do, and that's how they do it. Yeah, so they have to plan the store out quite specifically to make sure that everything lines up correctly so that the arrows are pointing to the correct section and the section is actually there. The last thing I wanted to point out about spacing is that you do not have to fill up all of the space, right? There's quite a lot of empty space on the orange. They did not feel the need to expand everything to fill all of the space. So it's okay. You can have it and it looks fine. And also sometimes you need it because you need space for longer things, and sometimes the container, what's contained in there, is shorter and there's going to be more white space. That's okay. Okay, so there's no one-size-fits-all arrangement for alignment. So you have lots of flexibility. This might be a bit confusing as well. Because you have lots of flexibility, there's lots of potential options. But again, try and experiment, see what feels good, right? When edges and the baselines line up, there are even margins, there's enough white space, you feel much more calm. And it's communicating, okay, somebody thought this through for me, making it easy for me to understand. Last point is applying and establishing consistent patterns. So once you have all of these patterns, you've gone through all this work, you don't have to reinvent it every time. You just have to apply it on successive screens, right? So you can just use it over and over again, and that way the users don't have to learn the layout from scratch every time. So it also means that if you have similar types of objects, they should behave the same way, they should look the same way. So if you have an action button, you're not going to make it look one way on one screen and a different way on a different screen. You can have different classes of action buttons, like so some that are meant for detail and others that are meant for the table or whatever in context. But when they are in that context, once you establish that style, you're kind of communicating this is this kind of button. So you want to maintain that wherever that type of action is happening. Oh, I'm sorry. So every aisle in the store uses the same sign template. So the content is different image, whatever, but we can see, oh, it goes on, if there was more aisles, we would assume they would be 9, 10, 11, they would look all the same, right? You don't have to relearn where to look. The same idea, reuse and repeat. So there's a little bit of difference because the different icon, different name, but it's the same pattern over and over again. Even Canadian Tire uses this. Eventually you find an aisle, and then you can see what's in there. They don't have as many, sort of smaller, they have less fine categories, and the signage is not as clear, in my opinion, but they're still following the same pattern over and over again. And the dollar store, not a lot of hierarchy, but they're still using repetition, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're also using contrast, right? They're making sure that the green and yellow is easily seen, and it's also quite large.
Same picture for every aisle?
They have the same picture for every aisle. Yeah, it's a seasonal picture. So they just have, like, it's fall, they put something for fall. If it's Christmas, they're going to put something for Christmas. They're not even trying to tell you what's there. You just really have to go. And actually, one time I was going in the store the opposite way from the same person, and then at the end of every aisle, we met each other and sort of had, like, after the third time, it just became funny because we were just kept doing the same thing. Because you don't know what's there if you've never been there. You literally have to walk the entire store. So you want the same styles, button treatments, positioning, behaviors for similar elements across your app. And when that follows predictable patterns, then users feel more confident and they spend less time figuring things out, and they build speed and trust through that repetition. Okay, so we're going to look at some actual UIs, but let's just wrap this up. So visual hierarchy, as you've seen, is not just about the data that's contained inside of your app. It's really about using design to create meaning for people. And what I want to show you here is all the elements we've talked about are present, right? Every single one of them. Visual hierarchy, information architecture, contrast, grouping, size differences, alignment and spacing, reliable patterns, right? So the more of them you can use, the stronger is your design. Okay, so I'm just going to recap these so that we're going to look at some UIs, but just so you remember. And also, if you've downloaded the PDF, there's a little reference at the end, page 9, so you can do it there too, but we'll just go over them quickly. So for strong visual hierarchy, because we don't know what these UIs are really for, we're just looking at a screenshot, you're going to ask, does my eye go into the right place or to somewhere in the order that makes sense for this thing, for this app? Can I easily find what I need to determine the next step? Do the key elements stand out clearly from everything else? Do related items appear together in a way that makes sense? Do these text sizes and weights tell me where I should look? Are they aligned neatly? Is there consistent spacing between elements and margins and things? And do things that are similar look similar, behave in a similar way? We may not know. Some of these are a little bit hard to tell just from a glance, but we're going to try. And if you need the QR code again, in case you missed it, anybody need this? And then check your email. You'll get an email to download. You get the link in the email. Okay, so here's a UI in FileMaker. This is my UI. And I'm sorry, it seems like I'm just giving myself high marks and just do everything I do, but I really wanted to show you something that had all of these elements into it, and this is the thing that was most easily at hand for me. This is the Confident theme. It's a theme that I created, and you can purchase this theme. It's a fully functional little app, and I promise that the orange and black color scheme was not taken from Home Depot. It is completely coincidence. I created this quite some time ago. So let's just take a look. So strong visual hierarchy, does your eye go somewhere? Yes. Can you find what you need and determine the next step? Yes. So either you're looking for the balance or you're maybe going to go create another invoice. Is there enough contrast? Key elements stand out clearly from everything else? Meaningful grouping, I worked hard on this one. So there's an area for the address and billing information, the area for the items, and then the area with all of the totals at the bottom. Deliberate size differences. So there's a lot of different sizes of text here. There's quite a few styles. Sometimes I feel like we're afraid to create styles, like too many styles, but styles really help you communicate what type of information am I looking at. Alignment and spacing. So obviously I wanted it to feel very open even though it has all the information. And consistent patterns. So they are trying to use the same patterns, similar things are looking and behaving the same way. And you can't see the other screens, but they are all quite similar to this. We're using some of the same styles and patterns with just different content. So this is really just kind of what is possible in FileMaker. You can do all of these things. Okay, let's look at this first one. So does my eye go to the right place in the right order? Not really. I'm going to just go here. So can I easily find what I need and determine the next step? Not really. Do key elements stand out clearly? No. Do related items appear together in a way that makes sense? Maybe. Like there are some groups. Presumably they mean something to the people using this. Do text weights and sizes guide attention? No. Do elements align neatly and maintain consistent spacing? Maybe. Maybe. Do similar things look and behave the same way? Again, hard to tell, right? There's not really anything that comes out. Okay, let's look at a different UI. This happens to be the same UI redesigned. So a few years later, they came back and did a new version. Again, I don't know how well it works, but visually, right, they changed some things. So visual hierarchy, does my eye go to somewhere in the right place in the right order? I would say yes, you go right to the name. Before, we couldn't even tell that it was a project management. Now, at least we see the name of the project. Can I easily find what I need and determine the next step? I would say yes, because the red bars are standing out. That's something you need to pay attention to, right? Or I'm going to look at some other elements of my project. Is there contrast? So do key elements stand out clearly from everything else? I would say yes, the bars do stand out. The only thing is I'm not sure about the icon that's quite big and attracts a lot of attention. Maybe there's other icons similar in the other parts of the system let you know where you are, in which case it seems more functional. Meaningful grouping, I would say yes. This is much more meaningful than the previous one, even though presumably it's the same information. Deliberate size differences, yes, there's a lot of different size differences now here. Do elements align neatly and maintain consistent spacing? I would say much more than before. And patterns, do similar things look and behave the same way? We don't know for sure, but it looks like they have certain things that are repeating that you can kind of assume if you went to those areas, you would see something similar. Does that make sense so far? You kind of get the idea? Okay. So I'm not an orthodontist. Surprise. But this is an orthodontic piece of software. So if I was an orthodontist, perhaps I would make more sense of what's here. But we're just looking at it, presumably no one else is an orthodontist here. We're just looking at it visually, right? Does my eye go to the right place in the right order? Well, there's the name, so I know that's important. I want to know who I'm on. Past that, I don't know. Can I easily find what I need and determine the next step? Maybe. Like there's x-ray stuff, there's a bit of information. It's not clear to me that, and I always had more time to look at it than you do right now, but even after looking at it for a while, it's not totally clear. Not a lot of contrast, right? The colors, yes, no idea what these colors mean. They don't seem to be conveying anything specific. So why are we using colors if we're not going to actually create meaning out of it? Sorry, I'll ask you first before I reveal. Meaningful grouping, do related items appear together in a way that makes sense? Sort of. Deliberate size differences, do text sizes and weights guide the attention? Not really. I feel like, other than the large name, there's not a lot else that's different. Alignment and spacing, sorry, I passed with the trigger finger. Alignments do the element. So it's like everything is kind of all over the board, right? The top is aligned in different ways. There's not really like an overarching system of alignment. And do similar things behave in similar ways? Maybe there's like some stuff that maybe, like the x-ray kind of seems like it's going through, there's a row of buttons. And then I realized the top isn't just like a toolbar, it's actually like settings and stuff like that. So it's like, I don't even know why that's there in this, seems like an interior screen. All right, so I'm still not an orthodontist, but this is much clearer. Do we have strong visual hierarchy? Does our eye go somewhere? Yes, we have auto setup and move teeth. I don't know what move teeth means. Can I easily find what I need and determine the next step? It has a logical information architecture. Yes, it seems like we're talking upper and lower jaw, so I can understand that, upper and lower, and we're doing something orthodontic with these two things, and it seems like it's well divided between these, and so just generally knowing what a mouth looks like, it seems like it makes sense. Is there enough contrast? Yeah, my eye really goes down to this button at the bottom, like the title and the button. So the title and the button tell me, okay, this is what I'm doing, and then I start to read the content. Okay, now if I understand what my task is, I go through the screen. What about meaningful grouping? Yes, I would say it's much better than before. Again, not an orthodontist, but the things are laid out in a much more understandable way. Deliberate size differences? Yes. Alignment and spacing. Yeah, so there's much more space in between everything, right, than we saw in some of the other ones. A lot of extraneous stuff is removed. We're just focusing on what the important things are. And then consistent patterns? I would say yes, because those little buttons are all kind of styled the same way, right? The arrows are all styled the same way. The, I guess you'd call them settings or whatever, like informational things are all styled the same way. The explanatory text is smaller, it's different, right? So we're really sort of seeing a lot of the principles that we've been talking about being used here. And yeah, that's similar things look and behave the same way. Does that make sense to people? Yes. Okay. So you can see at a glance, we don't know much about how to use this software. We can see at a glance there's a big difference visually between the two. All right, so this is a solution that I redesigned a couple of years ago. This is a real FileMaker solution. And again, similar to what we saw at the beginning, it was a bit of an architectural dig. They had a lot of things added, and they would just sort of move things over. There was a ton of different, like nothing was the same anywhere on any of these elements, basically. Different people, different times. There was a lot that was also extraneous on here. When we finally did an inventory of it, there's a lot of things that just could be removed. People weren't using them. Somebody asked for it 10 years ago, it just stayed there, it was never removed. And this is the redesigned version of it. So we still have a lot of information, and one of the reasons why I showed you that other one at the beginning as well, because it's easy to show you a very empty screen, but the question is, well, where do I put all this stuff? My client has all this information they want to see, what do I do with it? So sometimes you can reduce, like we said, get rid of anything they're not using, why bother with it if it's not useful? And then you have to organize the rest. But not everything has to be on the first surface. So our visual hierarchy and also our information architecture comes into play. Some of the information is less important, it can be hidden into a tab. But because we have consistent patterns, if you go to billing, what do you expect to see in billing? Something similar to what you already see here, right? You're not expecting something completely different. And do you feel the difference inside between these two things? Okay, great. Okay, so every principle we covered today is really about one thing, which is helping the people who are using your apps, make them feel happier and successful. You want them to trust you more, and you do that by prioritizing the right things and organizing the screen around their goals. And when you do that, people feel taken care of, right? They feel like you understand them, they trust you more, and you've made sure that they have what they need and when they need it. So I also hope you saw today you don't need to be born with talent. Right? You already understand intuitively some of these things. It's really more about just being more aware of them. And that's the work that I do when I'm doing education through FM Design University, through my courses. I help people sort of understand these things more. And so as you take these 7 ideas back to your projects, you're not just making it look nice, you're really trying to communicate, and you're trying to focus on making people feel comfortable and increasing their trust in you. So design is all around you, and I hope that you take these lessons forward into your work. Thank you very much for coming today.